I never thought my own flesh and blood could betray me so deeply. My name is Emma Wilson, and at 32 years old, I believed I had finally found my happily ever after with Michael, the man I had been dating for 3 wonderful years. My life had fallen into place, like the perfect puzzle. A successful career in marketing at a prestigious firm in Chicago, a beautiful apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, and a man who looked at me like I hung the moon and stars. The day Michael proposed at the Chicago Botanical Garden, surrounded by blooming roses and the sweet scent of summer, I truly believed I had everything I had ever wanted. My sister Olivia was the first person I called after saying yes. Despite our complicated relationship growing up, I wanted to share this moment with her. Olivia and I were only 3 years apart, and throughout our childhood, there had always been an undercurrent of competition that I tried to ignore. When she married Brian Harris 4 years ago, I had been nothing but supportive, serving as her maid of honor and helping plan every detail of her wedding. I expected the same enthusiasm from her when I shared my news, but something in her voice sounded hollow when she congratulated me. "That's wonderful, Em. I'm so happy for you," she said, but the words lacked warmth. I brushed aside the feeling, attributing it to her busy schedule with 2 young children and her job as a real estate agent. When we hosted our engagement party at my parents' suburban home, Olivia arrived dressed in a striking red dress that seemed more appropriate for a gala than a family gathering. As she hugged me, she whispered, "Enjoy this moment, Em. Engagements are so much more magical than marriage." Something in her tone made me pull back and study her face, but she quickly smiled and moved on to greet other guests. Throughout the evening, I noticed how she seemed to linger around Michael, touching his arm when she laughed at his jokes, standing just a little too close. When she offered to show him the renovations in my parents' kitchen, they disappeared for nearly 20 minutes. I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, this was my sister, the person who had shared a bedroom with me for 16 years, who knew all my secrets and insecurities. Later that night, as Michael and I drove home, he mentioned how interesting my sister was. "Olivia has such a unique perspective on things," he said. "She told me some stories about your childhood I'd never heard before." A small knot formed in my stomach, but I nodded and smiled. "That's Olivia for you, always the storyteller." Little did I know that this moment was the first thread unraveling in what would become the complete destruction of my happiness. I had always trusted my sister, despite our rivalry growing up. When we were children, if I got a new doll, Olivia would cry until she got one too. If I made the honor roll, she would stay up studying for days to match my grades. But we were adults now, and I believed we had moved past those childish jealousies. As I drifted off to sleep that night, Michael's arm around my waist, I pushed aside the tiny voice, warning me that something wasn't right. Looking back, I should have listened to that voice. I should have seen the glint in Olivia's eyes when she looked at my engagement ring, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes when she congratulated us. But I was blinded by my own happiness and the belief that blood would always be thicker than water. I had no idea that my own sister was already plotting to take away everything I loved, simply because she couldn't stand to see me happy. The weeks following our engagement were a whirlwind of excitement and planning. I created Pinterest boards filled with wedding ideas, booked appointments with florists and caterers, and spent hours researching venues. Michael and I decided on a spring wedding, giving us about a year to plan everything. I asked Olivia to be my maid of honor, hoping to strengthen our bond through this experience. She accepted, with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm. But as we began diving into wedding preparations, I started noticing subtle signs of her displeasure. "Are you sure you want roses? They're so common," she would say. Or, "That venue seems a bit ambitious for your budget, don't you think?" Each comment came with a smile, but felt like tiny paper cuts. Individually insignificant, but collectively painful. I arranged for her to join me for my first wedding dress appointment at an upscale boutique in downtown Chicago. My mother and 2 closest friends came along, and initially, the atmosphere was joyful and supportive. I tried on several gowns before finding one that made everyone gasp. A stunning off-shoulder satin dress with delicate beading and a cathedral train. As I stood on the pedestal, tears welling in my eyes at my reflection, Olivia approached with a glass of champagne the boutique had offered us. What happened next seemed like an accident. She tripped slightly, sending the champagne spilling down the front of the pristine white gown. The boutique staff rushed to clean it, while Olivia apologized profusely. "I'm so clumsy. These heels are impossible," she exclaimed, looking mortified. But something in her expression didn't match her words. There was a flash of something else before the apology came. I assured her it was fine, that accidents happen, but the moment had been ruined. Later, as we left the boutique, my mother pulled me aside. "That was strange," she whispered. "Olivia has never been clumsy a day in her life. She was a ballerina for 12 years. I shrugged it off, unwilling to assign malicious intent to what could have been a genuine accident. That evening, as I recounted the dress shopping experience to Michael, I found myself editing out the champagne incident. Something inside me didn't want him to think poorly of my sister. Or perhaps I didn't want to acknowledge the possibility that she had done it intentionally. The memory of our childhood flashed through my mind. When I was 16 and selected for a prestigious summer art program, Olivia had accidentally spilled coffee on my portfolio the night before it was due. I had stayed up all night recreating my pieces, and my exhaustion had shown in the final products. I pushed the memory away, telling myself we were adults now. The following weekend, we visited potential venues, and I invited Olivia to join us. Throughout the day, she made subtle comparisons between the places we were seeing and her own wedding venue. Our reception at the Grand Millennial was so elegant. These places seemed nice too, though, in a more casual way. Each comment emphasized how her wedding had been more sophisticated, more elaborate. More than once, I noticed her watching Brian and Michael interact, her eyes calculating as they discussed their careers. Brian worked in middle management at an insurance company, while Michael was a rising star at a software development firm. Neither was struggling, but Michael's trajectory was clearly steeper. "Brian says the tech bubble is bound to burst again," Olivia mentioned during lunch. "He thinks software jobs are risky long-term investments." Michael smiled politely, but I could see his jaw tighten. Throughout the venue tours, I noticed how Olivia would subtly separate Michael and me, pulling him aside to get his opinion on something, or monopolizing his attention with questions about his work. Each time they spoke privately, he seemed more reserved afterward. That night, after dropping Olivia off, I asked Michael what they had discussed. "Just wedding stuff," he said vaguely, "and she was asking about my family." Something about his tone made me uncomfortable, but when I pressed, he insisted everything was fine. As we continued planning, my mother noticed the growing tension. "Maybe you should limit Olivia's involvement," she suggested, gently. "She seems to be causing more stress than helping." I defended my sister immediately. "She's trying to help. Besides, she's my only sister. I need to include her." My mother gave me a long look. "Sometimes being the bigger person means protecting yourself, Emma." I dismissed her concern, determined to preserve the image of sisterly harmony I had always wanted. Despite my efforts, a seed of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't help but notice how Olivia's helpfulness often left me feeling inadequate, and Michael seeming distant. Still, I pushed forward with wedding plans, inviting her to every appointment and consultation, hoping that involving her would dispel whatever jealousy might be brewing. I was determined to have my perfect wedding with my sister by my side, even as the warning signs continued to flash around me. As the months passed and our wedding date grew closer, Olivia's behavior became increasingly concerning. What started as subtle digs about my choices evolved into something more insidious. She began questioning Michael's commitment to me, planting seeds of doubt that took root despite my efforts to ignore them. I saw Michael having lunch with his colleague Jessica yesterday, she mentioned casually during a bridesmaid's lunch. They seemed very comfortable together. When I explained that Jessica was part of Michael's development team, and they often had working lunches, Olivia raised her eyebrows. "I'm just saying, they were laughing a lot. It didn't look like work to me." She left it at that, but the comment lingered in my mind. After that lunch, I found myself checking Michael's phone when he left it on the coffee table, then feeling ashamed of my suspicion. More troubling was Michael's gradual change in behavior. He became quieter at family gatherings, especially when Olivia was present. When I asked if something was wrong, he would say he was just tired or preoccupied with work, but his eyes would dart toward my sister. Before looking away, at my cousin's birthday party, I noticed Olivia maneuvering herself between Michael and me throughout the evening. She would interrupt our conversations, asking Michael to help her with drinks or to explain something about his job to another family member. By the end of the night, we had barely spent 10 minutes together. The following week, my college friend Danielle called me. "Emma, is everything okay between you and Michael?" she asked hesitantly. When I assured her things were fine, she paused before continuing. "It's just that Olivia mentioned to me that you two were going through a rough patch." She seemed really concerned. I was stunned. Michael and I had our occasional disagreements, but we were not going through a rough patch. When I confronted Olivia about this, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm just worried about you, Em," she said, her voice breaking. "You've seemed so stressed lately, and Michael's been working such long hours. I just want you to be happy." Her performance was so convincing that I found myself apologizing for confronting her, promising her that everything was fine between Michael and me. Later that night, I tried to discuss the incident with Michael, but he seemed distracted and irritable. "Why does it matter what Olivia says to your friends?" he asked. "It's just gossip." His dismissiveness surprised me, and when I pushed for more of a response, he snapped that he was tired of talking about my sister all the time. It was our first real argument in months, and it left me feeling hollow and confused. Over the next few weeks, Michael became increasingly distant. He started working later, sometimes not coming home until I was already asleep. When he did come home, he was quiet and preoccupied, often choosing to work on his laptop rather than talk with me. One evening, I suggested we take a weekend away to reconnect, but he claimed he had too much work to catch up on. My anxiety grew, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what was wrong. Weekends that had once been filled with lazy mornings and brunch dates became silent stretches of time where we orbited each other without truly connecting. At a family dinner, I excused myself to the bathroom and overheard Olivia and Michael talking in the hallway. "Emma doesn't need to know," Olivia was saying in a hushed voice. "It would only hurt her." When I turned the corner, they instantly fell silent, and Olivia gave me a bright smile. "There you are. Mum's about to serve dessert." When I asked Michael later what they were discussing, he claimed it was a surprise for me, but his eyes didn't meet mine. The following week at my bridal shower, I overheard two of my cousins whispering. "Poor Emma," one said. "She has no idea." When they noticed me approaching, they quickly changed the subject. Their smiles too wide and their voices too cheerful. When I asked Olivia if she knew what they were talking about, she feigned ignorance. "You know how people love to gossip," she said lightly. "Don't let it bother you." But it did bother me. Everyone seemed to know something I didn't, and the more I tried to understand what was happening, the more isolated I felt. Even my closest friends began treating me differently, their hugs lasting a bit too long, their eyes filled with something that looked uncomfortably like pity. The final straw came during my bachelorette party, which Olivia had insisted on planning. When we arrived at the restaurant for dinner, Michael's ex-girlfriend Amber was there, apparently invited by Olivia as a surprise. "You two were friends in college, right?" Olivia asked innocently when I pulled her aside. I thought it would be nice to include her. I had never been friends with Amber. In fact, their breakup had been particularly messy, and Michael had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with her. The evening was awkward and tense, with Amber making several references to her relationship with Michael and how they had once planned to move to New York together. By the time I returned home the next day, Michael was even more withdrawn than before. When I asked if we could talk about whatever was bothering him, he simply said, "Not now, Emma. I need some space." I crawled into bed that night, feeling like I was losing him without understanding why. Something was poisoning our relationship, and I was beginning to suspect my own sister was the toxic source. With just 3 months until our wedding, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Michael, once so affectionate and engaged, had become a stranger in our home. He started spending nights at his friend Dave's apartment, claiming he needed to focus on a major project at work. When he was home, he barely spoke to me, and when I tried to touch him, even just taking his hand or giving him a hug, he would stiffen or find an excuse to move away. The distance between us felt insurmountable, and I had no idea how to bridge it. One evening, while Michael was in the shower, his phone lit up with a text message from Olivia. I had never been the type to snoop, but desperation overrode my principles. The message read, "Did you tell her yet? This can't go on forever. She deserves to know the truth." My hands shook as I placed the phone back on the table. What truth? What had Olivia and Michael been discussing behind my back? When Michael emerged from the bathroom, I confronted him about the texts. His face drained of color, but instead of explaining, he accused me of invading his privacy. "I can't believe you're checking my phone now," he said, his voice cold. "This is exactly what I've been told to expect." Told by whom? I wondered, but before I could ask, Michael grabbed his keys and left the apartment. The next day, I confronted Olivia directly. "What have you been texting Michael about?" I demanded during our lunch together. Olivia's expression was a perfect mask of concern. "He's been confused about some things, Emma. I'm just trying to help him sort through it all. As your sister, I feel responsible for making sure you're both making the right decision." Her vague response infuriated me. But when I pushed for specifics, she simply patted my hand. "It's not my place to say more. Michael needs to be the one to talk to you." That evening, I tried calling several friends to talk through my confusion, only to discover that many of them seemed already aware of some situation involving my relationship. My college roommate Bailey was particularly evasive. "I think you should talk to Michael directly," she said, her voice uncomfortable. "Or maybe Olivia can explain things better." The mention of my sister's name set off alarm bells. How was Olivia positioned as an authority on my relationship? The following weekend was my bridal shower, organized by my mother and Olivia at my parents' home. As I circulated among guests, I couldn't help but notice the pitying glances and hushed conversations that stopped when I approached. During the gift opening, I overheard my Aunt Martha whispering to another relative, "I don't know how she's holding it together with everything that's happening." When I asked what she meant, both women blushed and mumbled something about wedding stress. Throughout the event, Olivia played the role of the supportive sister perfectly. She stayed by my side, managed the games with enthusiasm, and made a touching speech about how much she loved me. To anyone watching, she was the ideal maid of honor, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was performing for an audience while undermining me behind the scenes. Later, as guests were leaving, I pulled Olivia into our father's study. "What have you been telling people about me and Michael?" I asked directly. Her eyes widened with practiced innocence. "Nothing, Emma. Why would you think that?" Before I could respond, my mother called for help in the kitchen, and Olivia slipped away. The following week brought another disturbing development. Looking through our shared calendar to confirm wedding details, I discovered Michael had scheduled a lunch with my former boss, Richard, whom I had left on bad terms after he made inappropriate advances. When I asked Michael about it, he seemed genuinely confused. "Olivia said you wanted me to meet with him to smooth things over before the wedding. She said it was important to you to have him there." I had never said any such thing, nor would I want Richard anywhere near our wedding. When I called Olivia to demand an explanation, she claimed there had been a misunderstanding and promised to clarify with Michael. The final blow came during what should have been a fun milestone, my bachelorette weekend in Nashville. Olivia had insisted on handling all the arrangements, promising a relaxing girls' trip with my closest friends. The first red flag appeared when we arrived at our hotel, and I discovered that not only had Olivia invited Michael's ex-girlfriend Amber, but she had arranged for us to share a room. "The bookings got mixed up," Olivia explained, with an apologetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's just for 2 nights. I'm sure you two can get along." Throughout the weekend, Amber made constant references to her history with Michael, particularly focusing on how she had let him go because he wasn't ready for commitment. Even more disturbing were the text messages I received from Michael, asking why I had invited Amber and if there was something I needed to tell him. It became clear that Olivia had been feeding him misinformation as well, creating a web of confusion and suspicion between us. By the time I returned home, Michael had moved most of his things to Dave's apartment. I need time to think, he said, when I begged him to talk to me. This isn't what I signed up for, Emma. I spent that night crying alone in our apartment, surrounded by wedding invitations we had yet to mail, completely baffled as to how my perfect relationship had unraveled so quickly. I couldn't understand what was happening, but one thing was becoming increasingly clear. My sister was somehow at the center of it all, and whatever she was doing was effectively destroying the life I had planned with the man I loved. 1 month before, what should have been the happiest day of my life, everything fell apart completely. I came home from work to find Michael sitting in our darkened living room, a manila envelope on the coffee table in front of him. His face was a mask of pain and anger, his eyes red-rimmed, as though he'd been crying. "We need to talk, Emma," he said, his voice hollow. "I can't do this anymore." My heart hammered against my ribs as I sat across from him, the coffee table between us feeling like an ocean. Michael pushed the envelope toward me. "Open it," he said. With trembling fingers, I pulled out several printed pages. Screenshots of text messages supposedly between me and someone named Jason, planning meetups at hotels, exchanging explicit messages, and discussing how to keep Michael from finding out. There were also photos, clearly doctored, showing someone with my hair and build entering hotel rooms with an unidentifiable man. "I didn't do this," I whispered, my voice catching. "Michael, these are fake. I've never cheated on you. I don't even know anyone named Jason." Michael's laugh was bitter. "That's what Olivia said you'd say. She warned me months ago that you were hiding something, but I didn't want to believe her. Then she showed me the first messages." Ice flooded my veins. "The first messages? How long have you been seeing these?" His answer devastated me. "Since 3 months after we got engaged. Olivia came to me privately, said she was torn about whether to tell me, but that she couldn't stand by and watch me marry someone who wasn't being faithful." Everything suddenly made sense. His growing coldness, the distance, the nights spent away from home. For 7 months, Michael had believed I was cheating on him, fed a constant stream of fabricated evidence by my own sister. "None of this is real," I said desperately, tears streaming down my face. "Olivia made it all up. You have to believe me." But Michael had been poisoned against me for too long. "I wanted to," he said, standing up. "God, Emma, I wanted to believe you were the person I thought you were. But there's too much evidence. Olivia has been right about everything." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, the ring I had given back to him each night to keep safe while I slept. "The wedding's off. I've already called my family and close friends. You should do the same." With those words, he walked out, leaving me clutching fabricated evidence of betrayals I had never committed. In a fog of shock and devastation, I drove to Olivia's house, the envelope of false evidence on the passenger seat. When she opened the door, she took one look at my tear-stained face and pulled me into a hug. "Oh, Em, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice dripping with concern. I pulled away from her embrace and held up the envelope. "You did this," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the storm raging inside me. "You created these fake texts and photos. You've been poisoning Michael against me for months." For a moment, shock registered on Olivia's face, before her features settled into practiced sympathy. "Emma, you're upset and looking for someone to blame. Michael showed me those messages too. I didn't want to believe it either, but the evidence is pretty clear. Her performance was flawless." The concerned sister, heartbroken for me, but unable to deny the truth. I searched her eyes for any glimmer of guilt or remorse, but found only a cool calculation behind her mask of sympathy. "Why would you do this?" I asked, my voice breaking. "What did I ever do to you that was so terrible you needed to destroy my happiness?" Olivia's expression hardened slightly. "You're not thinking straight, Emma. I've only ever wanted what's best for you. If Michael believes you cheated, maybe there were problems in your relationship you weren't seeing." As I stood there in her perfectly decorated foyer, I realized there was no getting through to her. She would never admit what she had done, never acknowledge the deliberate destruction she had wrought. I left her house feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. Over the next few days, the full extent of Olivia's betrayal became clear. Most of our friends and family had already heard a version of events that cast me as the villain. The cheating fiancé, caught in her lies. My mother called, her voice heavy with disappointment. "I raised you better than this, Emma," she said. "How could you hurt Michael this way?" No amount of protestation convinced her that the evidence was fabricated. My father couldn't even speak to me, sending a text that simply read, "Need time to process this. We'll call when ready." Friends I had known for years suddenly had excuses for why they couldn't meet for coffee or return my calls. The isolation was complete and devastating. Every night I went to sleep in the apartment that had once been filled with love and laughter, now eerily quiet without Michael's presence. I tried repeatedly to reach him, sending emails detailing why the evidence had to be fake, calling until he blocked my number, even waiting outside his office one day in a desperate attempt to make him listen. Nothing worked. He had been convinced of my betrayal for so long that nothing I could say would change his mind. As the days passed, I spiraled deeper into depression. I called the wedding vendors to cancel everything, each conversation a fresh wound as I explained that there would be no wedding. I boxed up gifts that had already arrived, writing apology notes to include when I returned them. One afternoon, I found myself sitting on the floor of what would have been our future home office, surrounded by the shattered pieces of the life we had planned, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. In that moment of utter despair, I questioned whether I had somehow deserved this betrayal. Had I been a bad sister to Olivia growing up? Had I taken Michael for granted? Was there something fundamentally unlovable about me that made my own sister want to destroy my happiness? The wedding date came and went. I spent it alone in my apartment, blinds drawn, phone turned off, a half-empty bottle of wine, my only companion. I had hit rock bottom, and the worst part was that I still didn't fully understand why Olivia had done this to me. What could I possibly have done to deserve such calculated cruelty from my own flesh and blood? For 2 weeks after the wedding was cancelled, I barely functioned. I called in sick to work, ignored my ringing phone, and subsisted on delivery food and whatever I could find in my pantry. The blinds stayed drawn, and I moved between my bed and the couch like a ghost, haunting my own life. Sleep eluded me, and when it did come, it was filled with dreams of Michael and Olivia laughing at me, pointing at fabricated evidence. Their faces twisted with cruel amusement. On the 15th day of my self-imposed isolation, a persistent knocking at my door finally broke through my fog. It was Caroline, a colleague from work who had become a friend over the years, though not someone I would have considered part of my inner circle. "Your boss asked me to check on you," she explained, pushing past me into the apartment. "Everyone's worried." I started to give her the sanitized version of events. That Michael and I had broken up. That the wedding was off. But she cut me short. "I know what happened, Emma. At least I know what people are saying happened. But something doesn't add up." Caroline had always been perceptive, and unlike my closer friends, she had little connection to Olivia. As we talked, she revealed something that made my heart stop. "I ran into Tara last week," she said, referring to one of Olivia's friends, who I had met a few times at family events. "She was pretty drunk at this bar downtown, and she was talking about how clever your sister is, how she finally put you in your place, after years of being in your shadow." Caroline's words were like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. Someone else suspected the truth. I wasn't crazy. Over the next few hours, Caroline helped me piece together what had happened. She had pressed Tara for details, and in her inebriated state, Olivia's friend had revealed more than she should have. Apparently, Olivia had been planning this sabotage for months, carefully constructing fake evidence and feeding it to Michael, while simultaneously spreading rumors among our friends and family. "The crazy thing is, Tara seemed to think it was justified," Caroline said, disgust evident in her voice. "Like Olivia deserved to ruin your happiness because she was jealous." More importantly, Caroline had convinced Tara to forward her a series of texts between herself and Olivia that proved what had happened. In one particularly damning exchange, Olivia had written, "It worked. Michael called off the wedding. Emma's finally getting what she deserves, after years of everyone thinking she's so perfect." Armed with this evidence, I attempted to contact Michael again, sending him screenshots of the texts between Olivia and Tara. His response was brief and crushing. I don't want to be caught in the middle of your family drama anymore. Please respect my decision and move on. The text felt like the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. Even with proof of Olivia's deception, he wasn't willing to reconsider. His rejection forced me to face a painful truth. Whether Olivia had sabotaged us or not, Michael had been willing to believe the worst about me without giving me a real chance to defend myself. Our next encounter with Olivia came at my nephew's birthday party. I had almost skipped the event, but my therapist had encouraged me to begin reclaiming my place in the family. Throughout the party, Olivia played the role of the sympathetic sister perfectly, offering meaningful glances and gentle touches on my arm whenever other family members were watching. How are you holding up? She would ask, her voice pitched perfectly to convey concern. When no one was looking, however, there was something else in her eyes, a gleam of satisfaction, a subtle smirk that made my skin crawl. I maintained my composure throughout the party, but the experience left me exhausted and angry. The betrayal wasn't just about losing Michael. It was about recognizing that this dynamic with Olivia had defined our relationship since childhood. Every accomplishment of mine had been met with jealousy, every happiness with resentment. The pattern was so clear now that I couldn't believe I had missed it for so long. In a desperate attempt to escape the toxic environment, I decided to take the 2-week trip to Italy that was supposed to be my honeymoon. The tickets were non-refundable, and the thought of wandering the streets of Rome alone seemed preferable to staying in Chicago, surrounded by the wreckage of my life. My parents tried to dissuade me, worried about me traveling alone in my emotional state. But I needed the distance, both physically and emotionally, to begin healing. The first few days in Rome were a blur of tears and room service. But, gradually, the beauty of the city began to penetrate my grief. I forced myself to venture out, visiting the Colosseum, the Vatican, and countless piazzas. During a guided tour of the Roman Forum, I met Eleanor Thompson, an American business executive in her 50s, who was in Italy for a conference. Something about her confident demeanor and sharp intelligence drew me to her, and we ended up having dinner together that evening. As the wine flowed, I found myself telling her everything. Michael, Olivia, the cancelled wedding, all of it. Instead of the pity I had come to expect, Eleanor listened with analytical interest, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished my story, her response surprised me. Your sister did you a favor, she said, refilling my wine glass. She showed you exactly who in your life is worth keeping and who isn't. She leaned forward, her expression intense. The question now is what you're going to do with this information. Over the remaining days of my trip, Eleanor became something of a mentor to me. She challenged me to envision a life rebuilt entirely, on my own terms, without the constraints of toxic relationships or others' expectations. As the CEO of a successful marketing analytics firm, she recognized my professional potential and suggested I consider a career shift. You're talented, Emma. Too talented to be stuck in a mid-level position at a company that doesn't value innovation. On my last night in Italy, Eleanor offered me something unexpected. An introduction to her friend, who ran an emerging digital marketing agency in Chicago. They're looking for someone with precisely your skill set. It would be a risk. They're smaller than your current firm, but the growth potential is enormous. For the first time since my world had collapsed, I felt a spark of excitement about the future. I returned to Chicago with a clarity I hadn't possessed before. The apartment Michael and I had shared felt suffocating, so I broke the lease and found a smaller place in a different neighborhood. I deleted his number from my phone, unfriended him on social media, and packed away any reminders of our relationship. It wasn't about erasing him. It was about creating space for whatever might come next. The interview with Eleanor's contact went surprisingly well, and within 2 weeks, I had accepted a position as Director of Client Strategy at Vertex Digital, a boutique agency specializing in emerging markets. The role came with more responsibility than my previous job, a significant salary increase, and equity options, a vote of confidence that boosted my shattered self-esteem. Most importantly, I made a difficult but necessary decision regarding Olivia. After much consideration and several sessions with my therapist, I sent my sister a brief email explaining that I needed distance from our relationship. I didn't accuse her of anything. There was no point in giving her an opportunity to deny it again, but simply stated that I recognized unhealthy patterns between us and needed time to focus on my own well-being. Her response was predictably self-righteous, painting herself as the victim of my unfair accusations and emotional instability. I didn't reply. As summer turned to fall, I immersed myself in building my new life. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something else. A quiet determination to create something better than what I had lost. For the first time, I wasn't defined by my relationship with Michael or my rivalry with Olivia. I was simply Emma Wilson, discovering who I could be when I wasn't trying to please everyone else. Returning from Italy with a new perspective was just the beginning of my transformation. With Eleanor's guidance, I had secured a position that challenged and excited me. But the real work of rebuilding my life was only beginning. My first day at Vertex Digital set the tone for my new approach to life. I arrived early, dressed in a sleek black suit that projected confidence I didn't entirely feel yet, and dove headfirst into learning about my new role. The company was everything Eleanor had promised: innovative, fast-paced, and filled with creative people who judged me solely on my ideas and work ethic, not on gossip or preconceptions. For the first time in months, I went a full day without thinking about Michael or Olivia. The distance I had established from my sister wasn't easy to maintain. My parents struggled to understand why I wouldn't attend family dinners if Olivia would be present, and they pressured me to make peace for the family's sake. After several uncomfortable conversations, I finally sat them down and showed them the text messages Caroline had obtained from Tara. The revelation shocked them into silence, and while they didn't immediately cut ties with Olivia, as part of me had hoped they might, they did stop pushing me to reconcile. "We love both our daughters," my father said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "But what Olivia did was unforgivable. Take all the time you need, Emma." The conversation wasn't perfect, but it was progress. With the pressure to maintain appearances lifted, I could focus on building my new life. I moved into a light-filled apartment in Wicker Park, a neighborhood I had always loved, but Michael had found too hipster. I decorated it exactly as I wanted: bold colors, eclectic furniture, and plenty of plants. Every decision, from the blue velvet sofa to the Moroccan-inspired bedroom, was mine alone. There was something profoundly healing about creating a space that reflected only my tastes and preferences. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, helped me work through the complex emotions surrounding Olivia's betrayal. "What your sister did reveals her issues, not yours," she reminded me during our weekly sessions. "People who are secure and happy don't need to destroy others' joy." Through our work together, I began to see how Olivia's behavior had been consistent throughout our lives. The jealousy, the competition, the subtle undermining that I had always excused or ignored. I also had to confront an uncomfortable truth about myself. I had enabled her behavior by always trying to smooth things over, by diminishing my own accomplishments to avoid triggering her jealousy, by making excuses for her actions. Breaking this pattern meant establishing firm boundaries, not just with Olivia, but with anyone who didn't respect my worth. At work, I threw myself into proving Eleanor's faith in me was justified. My first major project involved developing a marketing strategy for a tech startup, entering the competitive healthcare space. The pressure was intense, but I thrived on the challenge, working late into the night, researching market trends and competitor strategies. When I presented my findings to the client, their enthusiasm validated not just my professional abilities, but my decision to take this risk. "This is exactly what we needed," the founder told me, shaking my hand vigorously. "You've given us a roadmap we can actually follow." The success led to more challenging assignments and greater responsibility. 6 months into my new role, I was asked to represent Vertex at a digital marketing conference in San Francisco. The old Emma would have been terrified of such visibility, but now I embraced the opportunity. The conference proved to be a turning point in more ways than one. During a panel discussion on emerging trends in consumer engagement, I asked a question that caught the attention of one of the speakers, James Spencer, founder and CEO of Innovate Media, a company known for its cutting-edge approaches to digital marketing. After the panel, he sought me out to continue our conversation. James was unlike anyone I had ever met. Brilliant but unpretentious, confident without being arrogant, and genuinely interested in my perspectives. Our discussion about the intersection of AI and consumer behavior lasted through coffee and extended into dinner. It was the most intellectually stimulating conversation I'd had in years. And for the first time since Michael, I felt a spark of connection with someone. Before we parted ways, James mentioned that he was expanding Innovate's presence in the Midwest and would be in Chicago the following month. "I'd like to continue our conversation," he said, handing me his card. "Your insights on predictive analytics are fascinating." I couldn't tell if he was interested in me professionally, personally, or both, but I found myself looking forward to seeing him again. Back in Chicago, my personal growth continued, alongside my professional development. I joined a mixed martial arts gym, finding unexpected satisfaction in the physical and mental discipline required. I took a pottery class, rediscovering a creative outlet I had abandoned years ago. I made new friends who knew nothing about my history with Michael or Olivia, people who accepted me as I was without preconceptions or judgments. The most unexpected development came 3 weeks after the conference, when I received an email from Caroline. She had remained one of my few connections to my old life, occasionally meeting me for coffee and updates. Her message contained a screenshot of a social media post from Olivia, complaining about Brian's stalled career and their financial struggles after a failed investment. "Thought you might find this interesting," Caroline wrote. "Apparently, the perfect life isn't so perfect anymore." I felt a complex mix of emotions. A flash of satisfaction, followed immediately by guilt for taking pleasure in my sister's difficulties. It was a reminder that I still had work to do on myself, that being truly free of the toxic dynamics meant not engaging with them at all, even from a distance. When James came to Chicago, as promised, we met for dinner at an upscale restaurant overlooking the river. What I had assumed would be a professional discussion quickly revealed itself to be something more personal. James was divorced, had no children, and was refreshingly direct about his interest in me. "I enjoy talking with you, Emma," he said as we shared dessert. "You're intelligent, insightful, and surprisingly funny for someone who analyzes data for a living." For the first time in over a year, I laughed genuinely, without the weight of betrayal and loss pressing down on me. We began seeing each other whenever his business brought him to Chicago, which happened with increasing frequency. Our relationship developed slowly, built on intellectual connection and mutual respect, rather than the whirlwind romance I experienced with Michael. James never pushed for more than I was ready to give, seeming to understand intuitively that I was still healing from past wounds. 8 months after starting at Vertex, I received unexpected news. The agency was being acquired by Innovate Media, James's company. The merger would mean expanded opportunities for everyone at Vertex, but it also complicated my budding relationship with James. When he called to tell me personally about the acquisition, his first concern was how I felt about the potential conflict of interest. "Your career matters to me," he said. "If this makes you uncomfortable in any way, we can pause the personal side of our relationship." His consideration touched me deeply. After careful thought and discussions with my therapist, I decided that our relationship was worth navigating the professional complexities. We established clear boundaries. At work, he would never be directly involved in my performance reviews or compensation discussions, and we would be transparent with relevant colleagues about our relationship. The merger brought new energy and resources to our projects, and I found myself thriving in the expanded role I was offered as Regional Strategy Director. At 33, I was achieving professional success beyond what I had imagined possible a year earlier. More importantly, I was beginning to recognize my own resilience and worth in a way I never had before. The painful betrayal that had once seemed like the end of my world had ultimately pushed me toward a life more authentic and fulfilling than the one I had lost. As the months passed, my relationship with James evolved from cautious beginnings into something deeply meaningful. Unlike my whirlwind romance with Michael, this connection grew deliberately, with both of us mindful of my past wounds and his responsibilities as the head of the company where I now worked. We maintained professional boundaries at the office, but outside of work, we gradually let down our guards. James was 14 years older than me, with a maturity that came from experience rather than age alone. He had built Innovate Media from the ground up, weathering the dot-com crash and the 2008 recession through innovation and adaptability. His own marriage had ended amicably 7 years earlier, when he and his ex-wife realized they had grown in different directions, and he spoke of her with respect rather than bitterness. This emotional intelligence was what drew me to him most powerfully. One evening, as we walked along the lakefront after dinner, James asked about Michael for the first time. Until then, he had respected my reluctance to discuss my past relationship, letting me share details at my own pace. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not comfortable with," he said, his voice gentle. "But I care about you, Emma. I want to understand what shaped you." Something about the genuine concern in his eyes broke down my remaining barriers. Sitting on a bench overlooking the water, I told him everything. The engagement, Olivia's systematic destruction of my relationship, the cancelled wedding, and the painful aftermath. I expected to see pity in his expression, but instead found understanding and a quiet anger on my behalf. "Your sister's actions say nothing about your worth, and everything about her insecurity," he said, when I finished. "And Michael, any man who wouldn't even hear your side, doesn't deserve your regret." His words were like a balm to wounds that had never fully healed. For the first time, I told someone about my past, without feeling defined by it. As our personal relationship deepened, our professional lives flourished as well. The merger between Vertex and Innovate created exciting opportunities, and I found myself leading increasingly significant projects. James never showed me favoritism. In fact, he held me to higher standards than others, pushing me to develop skills I hadn't known I possessed. 6 months into the merger, he approached me with a challenging proposition. "We're developing a new division focused on predictive consumer behavior using AI," he explained during a private meeting in his office. "I think you should head it." The responsibility was enormous. I would be building a team from scratch, developing methodologies that didn't yet exist in the industry, and potentially reshaping how our clients approached digital marketing. When I expressed doubt about my qualifications, James shook his head. "This isn't about our relationship, Emma. I've watched how you work, how you think. You see patterns others miss. The team needs your perspective." After careful consideration, I accepted the position. The following weeks were a whirlwind of hiring decisions, strategy sessions, and late nights developing our approach. Throughout it all, James maintained professional distance at work while providing personal support. In our private time, we found a balance that allowed both aspects of our relationship to flourish without conflict. As I became more established in my new role, my financial situation improved dramatically. The combination of my director-level salary and the equity I had received in the merger allowed me to purchase a stunning condominium in Lincoln Park with panoramic views of the city and lake. On the day I closed on the property, James brought champagne to celebrate, and as we stood on the balcony watching the sunset, I realized how dramatically my life had changed in just 18 months. Through casual conversations with mutual friends and occasional social media glimpses, I learned that Olivia's life was taking a different trajectory. Brian had been passed over for promotions several times, and they had been forced to downsize their home after an investment in his friend's startup failed. Their financial stress was creating tension in their marriage, and Olivia had become increasingly bitter about their circumstances. I made a conscious decision not to engage with this information or take satisfaction in her difficulties. That would only mean she still had power over my emotions. One evening, after a particularly successful client presentation, James invited me to dinner at Alinea, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants. Throughout the meal, he seemed slightly nervous, unusual for someone normally so composed. As dessert arrived, he reached across the table to take my hand. "When we met, I wasn't looking for a relationship," he said quietly. I was focused on the business, on the next acquisition or innovation. But you've changed that, Emma. You've changed me. My heart raced as he continued. I know your past makes you cautious about commitment, and I respect that. I'm not asking for an answer tonight, but I want you to know that I love you, and when you're ready, I want to build a life with you. It wasn't a traditional proposal, and that made it perfect. James understood that after what I'd been through, I needed space to make decisions on my own terms. I didn't give him an answer that night, but in the weeks that followed, I found myself imagining a future with him. Not with anxiety or doubt, but with quiet confidence. 3 months later, during a weekend trip to Napa Valley, I told James I was ready. His response was characteristic of the man he was. Thoughtful, genuine, and focused on my happiness rather than his own expectations. Are you sure? He asked, searching my eyes. There's no timeline here, Emma. I'm not going anywhere. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that this was right. Unlike my relationship with Michael, which had been built partly on a desire to fulfill societal expectations, my connection with James was founded on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine understanding. We decided to keep our engagement private initially, savoring the commitment between us before sharing it with the world. During this time, I received an unexpected email from my mother. Olivia's been asking about you, she wrote. She says she wants to clear the air before the holidays. After discussing it with James and my therapist, I decided to maintain the boundaries I had established. My response was polite but firm. I'm not ready for that conversation yet. I hope you understand. The holidays approached with both excitement and tension. James and I had decided to announce our engagement at a New Year's Eve party he was hosting for close friends and key company personnel. 2 weeks before the event, I received a text from Caroline. Did you see Olivia's Facebook post? Brian lost his job. They're selling their house. I hadn't checked my sister's social media in months, maintaining the emotional distance that had been so crucial to my healing. Caroline's text stirred complicated feelings. Sympathy for their difficulties, mixed with wariness about Olivia's potential reaction to my happiness. The coincidental timing of their downturn and my ascent wasn't lost on me, but I refused to see it as karma or justice. Life was more complex than such simplistic narratives. Our engagement announcement was met with genuine happiness from our friends and colleagues. As photos from the party circulated on social media, I knew it was only a matter of time before Olivia learned about this new chapter in my life. What I hadn't anticipated was how quickly she would attempt to reinsert herself into my story. The new year began with a flurry of activity as James and I started planning our wedding, while simultaneously launching an ambitious expansion of our AI consumer prediction platform. We decided on a fall ceremony, small but elegant, at a vineyard in Sonoma that held special meaning for us after our engagement in Napa. Unlike my previous wedding plans with Michael, which had been driven partly by tradition and others' expectations, every decision James and I made reflected our actual preferences and values. We chose to work with a respected wedding planner who understood our desire for sophistication without ostentation, and the process was remarkably stress-free compared to my previous experience. 3 weeks after our engagement became public, I received a text message from a number I had deleted, but still recognized instantly. Olivia. Congratulations on your engagement. I'd love to talk when you have time. The message sat unanswered on my phone for days. As I considered my response, part of me wanted to ignore it completely, to maintain the clean break that had allowed me to heal. Another part was curious about what she could possibly want after nearly 2 years of silence. After discussing it with my therapist, I decided to respond with a brief acknowledgement. Thank you. I'm not ready for a conversation yet. Her reply came immediately. I understand. I just want you to know I'm happy for you. James seems like an amazing man. The compliment felt like bait, and I didn't take it. As our wedding plans progressed, word spread through family channels about the scale and location of the event, though we had kept the details relatively private. The wedding industry in Chicago was small, and our planner was known for handling high-profile celebrations. Somehow, information about the exclusive vineyard, the Michelin-starred catering, and James's substantial wealth made its way back to Olivia. One Sunday afternoon, as James and I were reviewing potential invitation designs in our condo, my phone rang with my parents' number. My mother's voice was hesitant. "Emma, I'm not sure how to tell you this, but Olivia showed up at our house today." She was quite upset. According to my mother, Olivia had broken down crying, claiming she couldn't bear the estrangement any longer. "She admits she was jealous of you and Michael." My mother continued. "She says she wants to make amends. Before your wedding, I felt a familiar tightness in my chest. The physical manifestation of the anxiety Olivia had always been able to trigger in me." James, noticing my expression, took my hand and squeezed it gently, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone this time. After ending the call with a promise to think about it, I turned to James. "She's reaching out now because she's seen the life we're building," I said, the realization crystallizing as I spoke. "It's not about reconciliation. It's about access." James nodded thoughtfully. "What do you want to do?" The question was simple, but profound. What did I want? Not what should I do, or what was expected of me. It was a perspective that still felt refreshingly new. After careful consideration, I agreed to meet Olivia at a cafe near my office, a public place where I could leave easily if necessary. James offered to be nearby, but I declined. "This is something I need to handle myself," I told him. The day of our meeting arrived with a mix of spring rain and pale sunshine that matched my conflicted emotions. I arrived early, choosing a table near the exit, and ordered a green tea to calm my nerves. When Olivia walked in, I was struck by how different she looked. Thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, and a tension in her movements that hadn't been there before. She spotted me and approached hesitantly, as if unsure of her welcome. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "You look amazing, Em." The familiar nickname sent an involuntary shiver through me. I nodded in acknowledgement, but didn't return the compliment. After ordering her coffee, Olivia launched into what felt like a rehearsed speech. "I've been doing a lot of thinking over the past year. Seeing a therapist, actually." She paused, perhaps expecting me to show approval. I kept my expression neutral. "What happened with Michael? I was in a bad place. Brian and I were having problems, and seeing you so happy." She trailed off, then took a deep breath. "I was jealous. I've always been jealous of you, even when we were kids. You made everything look so easy." I sat silently, letting her words hang in the air between us. This wasn't an apology. It was an explanation, a justification that centered her feelings, rather than acknowledging the harm she had caused. "I know I can't undo what happened," she continued. "But when I heard about your engagement to James, I realized I couldn't bear not being part of your life anymore. He seems wonderful, successful." There it was, the hint of calculation I had been waiting for. Success. In Olivia's world, that had always been the ultimate currency. "What exactly are you hoping for here, Olivia?" I asked, my voice steady. My directness seemed to throw her. I want us to be sisters again. I miss you, and with your wedding coming up." I cut her off gently but firmly. "The wedding is private, very small." Her face fell slightly. "Of course, I understand. But maybe afterward we could start rebuilding. Brian's been having a rough time professionally, and the girls miss their Aunt Emma." And there was the second part of the equation. What she wanted from me beyond emotional reconciliation. The old Emma would have felt obligated to help, would have ignored the manipulation, and focused on maintaining family harmony at any cost. But I wasn't that person anymore. "I appreciate you reaching out," I said, choosing my words carefully. "But trust, once broken, doesn't just repair itself because it's convenient. You systematically destroyed my relationship with Michael, spread lies about me to our friends and family, and watched me suffer without ever taking responsibility." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "I know, and I'm sorry. I really am. I was wrong." The words seemed practiced, lacking the depth of genuine remorse. "I believe you regret what happened," I replied. "But I don't think you understand the full impact of what you did. It's not just about Michael or the wedding. It's about realizing my own sister saw my happiness as something to destroy rather than celebrate. For the first time, Olivia seemed genuinely affected by my words. "What can I do?" she asked, her voice small. "How can I make it right?" I considered the question carefully. The truth was, I didn't want or need anything from her. The life I had built after her betrayal was stronger, more authentic, and more fulfilling than what I had lost. "I don't think this is something you can fix with a single conversation or gesture," I told her. "Real change takes time and consistent action. I need to see that you've genuinely changed before I can consider letting you back into my life." As our meeting ended, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't expected. I had faced my sister without anger or bitterness, setting boundaries based on self-respect rather than resentment. The following week, I made a decision that surprised even me. After discussing it with James, I sent Olivia and Brian an invitation to our wedding, accompanied by a gift card for $500 to a high-end department store, and a note, "I hope you find the happiness you're looking for. With sincere wishes for your future, Emma." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a release, a way of acknowledging our shared history, while maintaining the boundaries that protected my well-being. The wedding day arrived on a perfect autumn afternoon at the Sonoma Vineyard. As I prepared in the bridal suite, surrounded by my closest friends and my mother, I felt none of the anxiety that had plagued my previous engagement. James and I had written our own vows, promises based on the real understanding we had developed, rather than romantic platitudes. When I walked down the aisle toward him, his eyes shining with emotion, I knew with absolute certainty that I was exactly where I belonged. During the reception, Caroline approached me with an unexpected piece of information. "Michael is here," she said quietly. "He asked the planner if he could speak with you for a moment." My surprise must have shown on my face. Apparently James invited him. Something about closure. James had mentioned nothing about this to me, but as I searched the gathering, I spotted my former fiancé standing awkwardly near the vineyard entrance, with a reassuring smile to James across the room. I made my way over to Michael. 2 years had changed him. His hair was shorter, his face more lined. "Congratulations, Emma," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You look beautiful." I thanked him politely, waiting for him to explain his presence. "James contacted me last month," he continued. He thought I should know the truth about what happened. He showed me the evidence about Olivia." My breath caught in my throat as Michael continued. "I should have trusted you. I should have at least listened to your side. The way I ended things, I've regretted it every day since." The apology I had once desperately wanted now felt strangely unnecessary. "Thank you for saying that," I replied simply. "It means a lot to hear it." We talked for a few minutes more, about his life, his new relationship, his career change. The conversation was surprisingly easy, free of the tension or pain I might have expected. When we parted, it was with genuine good wishes on both sides. Later, I found James watching the sunset over the vineyard. "Why did you invite Michael?" I asked, slipping my arm through his. He turned to me with that thoughtful expression I had come to cherish. "Because you deserve to." 1 year after our wedding, James and I settled into a rhythm of life that felt both exciting and grounded. We had moved into a larger home in the Gold Coast neighborhood, close enough to the office for easy commutes, but with enough space to accommodate our growing ambitions. The AI prediction division I had built was now the fastest growing segment of Innovate Media, attracting clients from Fortune 500 companies and establishing our reputation as industry pioneers. My team had expanded from 3 people to 27, and I had recently been promoted to Executive Vice President, with a seat on the company's leadership board. Professional success had become something I enjoyed, rather than something I pursued to prove my worth. A subtle but profound shift in perspective. On a personal level, James and I had begun discussing starting a family, a conversation that filled me with excitement rather than anxiety. At 34, I felt ready to take on this new adventure, with a partner who genuinely supported my full personhood, not just the roles I could fulfill for him. Our relationship continued to be built on mutual respect, honest communication, and a shared vision for our future. As we celebrated our first anniversary with a weekend trip to Lake Geneva, I reflected on the journey that had led me to this point. The betrayal that had once seemed like the end of my world had ultimately been the catalyst for profound transformation. I had lost a relationship, but found myself in the process. My personal life had stabilized into something beautiful, but my relationship with Olivia remained complicated. After our wedding, she had made sporadic attempts to reconnect, usually during family holidays, or when she needed something. Her financial situation had continued to deteriorate after Brian was forced to take a position with significantly lower pay, and they had moved to a smaller house in a less prestigious suburb. Though I maintained polite distance, I couldn't help noticing the parallel between her current circumstances and where I had been after my wedding was cancelled, struggling to rebuild after significant loss. The difference was that Olivia's difficulties were largely self-inflicted, the consequences of choices she and Brian had made, while mine had been the result of deliberate sabotage. Still, watching her struggle stirred complicated emotions. During Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' home, where both Olivia and I had agreed to be present for our mother's sake, I observed how withdrawn she had become. The confident, sometimes arrogant sister I had known had been replaced by someone who seemed perpetually on edge, jumping at loud noises and apologizing unnecessarily for small mistakes. When she accidentally knocked over a wine glass, staining the tablecloth, she nearly burst into tears. "It's fine, Olivia," my mother assured her. "It's just a tablecloth." But I recognized the look in my sister's eyes. The fear of judgment, the expectation of criticism. It was a look I had worn myself not so long ago. As everyone moved to the living room for coffee, I found Olivia alone in the kitchen, blotting the stain with club soda. "It comes out better with salt first," I said, reaching for the shaker. "Then club soda." She looked up, surprised by my approach. "Thanks," she murmured, accepting the salt I offered. We worked side by side in silence for a moment before she spoke again. "Your company's doing really well. I saw the article in Business Insider." I nodded, acknowledging the compliment without elaborating. "And you and James seem happy." There was no edge to her observation, just a quiet assessment. "We are," I confirmed. The silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken history and lingering hurt. Finally, Olivia set down her cloth and turned to face me fully. "I know you don't owe me anything, Emma, and I know saying I'm sorry doesn't fix what I did, but I am sorry, truly." The words were simple, direct, and unadorned with excuses or justifications. For the first time, I sensed genuine remorse rather than performance. I studied her face, noting the new lines around her eyes, the tension held in her shoulders. "Why did you do it?" I asked quietly, the question I had carried for over 2 years. She didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Because I thought happiness was a fixed quantity," she replied after a long moment. "I believed that if you had more, it meant I had less." The honesty of her answer surprised me. "And now?" She smiled ruefully. "Now I know that thinking that way guarantees unhappiness, no matter how much you have." It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was perhaps the most honest exchange we had ever shared. In the weeks following Thanksgiving, I discussed the interaction with Dr. Martinez, my therapist. "Do you want to rebuild a relationship with your sister?" she asked. It was a question I had been asking myself as well. "Not the relationship we had before," I replied, after careful consideration. "That was built on competition and my willingness to diminish myself to avoid her jealousy. But maybe something new could be possible." Dr. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "What would that look like to you?" The question stayed with me as Christmas approached. James and I had planned to host a holiday party for our closest friends and selected colleagues. And after much reflection, I decided to extend an olive branch. I called Olivia directly, our first phone conversation in over 2 years, and invited her and Brian to attend. "It's not a family gathering," I explained. "It's mostly business associates and friends. But I thought, maybe it would be good for you to see this part of my life." There was a pause before she responded, her voice thick with unexpected emotion. "I'd like that. Thank you, Emma." The evening of the party arrived with a light snow falling over Chicago, giving the city a magical quality. Our home was transformed with subtle holiday decorations, Catering staff circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, and the atmosphere was festive yet elegant. When Olivia and Brian arrived, I greeted them with the same warmth I extended to all our guests, professional but welcoming. Throughout the evening, I observed Olivia's interactions with my colleagues and friends. She seemed genuinely interested in their conversations, asking thoughtful questions and listening attentively to their responses. There was none of the competitive edge I had come to expect from her in social situations. At one point, I overheard her speaking with Eleanor, who had flown in from New York specifically for the party. "Emma is remarkable," my sister was saying. "The way she rebuilt after everything. I admire her resilience more than I can express." The words, spoken when she didn't know I could hear, carried more weight than any apology she had offered. Directly to me. Later, as the party wound down and most guests had departed, Olivia approached me in the kitchen where I was speaking with the catering manager. "This was lovely," she said when we were alone. "Thank you for including us." I nodded, acknowledging her thanks. "Actually," she continued hesitantly, "I wanted to ask your advice about something." Professional advice. This was unexpected. Olivia had never sought my input on anything, always positioning herself as the one with superior knowledge or experience. "I'm thinking about a career change," she explained. "Real estate isn't working for me anymore, and I've been interested in digital marketing for a while now." The request was clear, though unspoken. She was hoping for an introduction, possibly even a position at Innovate. In the past, I might have agreed immediately, eager to please and maintain peace. Now, I considered carefully what healthy boundaries would look like in this situation. "Send me your resume," I said finally. "I can't promise anything, but I'm happy to review it and suggest some resources for building the skills you'll need." It wasn't an outright rejection, but neither was it the easy access she might have hoped for. She would need to earn any opportunity through legitimate qualifications, not family connections. The look of genuine gratitude on her face suggested she understood and accepted these terms. As James and I prepared for bed that night, I shared the interaction with him. "Do you think I'm making a mistake by opening the door even that much?" I asked. He considered the question with his characteristic thoughtfulness. "Trust is rebuilt in small steps," he said finally. "You're offering her a chance to show she's changed, but with appropriate boundaries. That seems wise to me." In the months that followed, Olivia did send her resume, along with questions about courses and certifications that might help her transition into digital marketing. Our interactions remained primarily professional, focused on her career development, rather than attempting to immediately restore the closeness we had once shared. It was a new kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation or competition. The greatest lesson I had learned through my journey from betrayal to rebuilding was that true freedom came not from revenge or resentment, but from creating a life so authentic and fulfilling that past hurts lost their power to define me. The leveling up I had achieved wasn't about marrying someone wealthier than my sister's husband or achieving greater professional success. Though those things had happened, it was about developing the courage to set boundaries, the wisdom to choose relationships that nurtured rather than diminished me, and the self-worth to know I deserved nothing less. On the second anniversary of the day my wedding to Michael should have happened, I realized I had gone the entire day without thinking about it until that moment. The date had once been etched in my memory as a monument to loss and betrayal. Now it was just another day in a life filled with purpose and genuine connection. Perhaps that was the most profound transformation of all. Not that I had built something better than what I had lost, but that I had become someone who no longer defined herself by what had been taken away. I had instead become a woman who created her own happiness, set her own boundaries, and lived authentically regardless of others' expectations or judgments. And that, I realized, was the true gift that had emerged from the ashes of betrayal. Not a better marriage or a more successful career, but a stronger, more authentic self who could never again be destroyed by someone else's jealousy or lies. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you recover and rebuild your life afterward? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, Please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more content about overcoming life's challenges and finding your authentic path. Remember, sometimes what feels like an ending is actually the beginning of something far more beautiful than you could have imagined. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to create boundaries that protect your peace and relationships that honor your worth.